This is Amber by Otica, I think they're pronounced. Yeah. I think that's how it's pronounced. So this is the 1994 album from Otica. Again, an album that I picked up on the strength of one track, which is the song Nil. The rest of the album, still very good. Almost kind of Aphex Twin light in a way. There are definitely elements that you can hear how they've influenced other artists, because while I'm not super keen on some of the tracks, like, they have stood the test of time. Like, they could have been released now, and I wouldn't have been able to tell any different. And the fact that this is, near enough 30 years ago, kind of blows my mind that people were making this sort of stuff. And I know you're not keen on them, but I feel the same about, like, Boards of Canada, the way that the stuff that they were doing, even though they were using hardware that even at the time was old, the sounds that they get out of them and that kind of, that Plunderphonics kind of vibe that they had, like, how they were doing that in the mid-90s, and there's still people trying to catch up today. And this is the same sort of thing, where there are electronic musicians who can't hold a candle to this, even with all of the hardware and equipment, and the fact that, this functionally, you could do this with any DAW, you could do this on a phone or an iPad or something if you wanted to. But it's just like that kind of testament to the sheer, like, musical talents of them. And it's, it's one of those ones when people say that electronic music doesn't take talent. Like, first of all, fuck off. And second of all, like, it obviously does, because otherwise anyone would be able to make something like this.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
No one can hold a candle to something like this in terms of that, like, weird techno ambient electronic kind of sound. As I said, Nil is the track that drew me to it. It starts off with, like, these weird, almost like sonar pings, and that's something, it's not used in tracks very often at all, but it's something that I really dig when songs have it. It's almost like the non-Christmas version of Sleigh Bells. Like, that kind of, the way they kind of pierce through the song and they provide, like, rhythm to it without, then it's not a drum hit. It's like a cymbal, but it's not like a cymbal. Yeah. And the when the bass kicks in on Nil, that weird little bass line that's kind of like detuned, almost like a Reese synth. Like, I fell in love with that track the second I heard that come in, because it's such an odd, weird sound, and the fact that, again, it was done nearly 30 years ago, and it sounds contemporary. Like,
is that album a reissue, or is that original?
So this was, I think this one was reissued last year. No, 2021, I think. Not 100% sure on that, but I bought it last year. I think the original as well. This is something I've noticed. This is very pink purpley, and while there's definitely kind of like a hue of that nature in the original artwork, other copies that I've seen of it seem to be a lot closer to like a sort of blue sky and white sand.
I'm looking at, I think it should be blue, but we were just talking about this today, about the Fun Boy 3 album, which is just being reissued. And I've got the original copy, and I thought I'll get a copy, it's all on red vinyl. But the cover looks so fake, because it looks like a really bad scam. Because obviously back then they didn't have like digital copies and things like that. It was all, I'd like to call it hardware, really, wasn't it? It wasn't digital really. But it just looks really rubbish. I mean, maybe that's the same kind of thing. I mean, 90, they wouldn't have so much digital stuff. Maybe it wasn't. Yeah. And the colours just come in.
Well, I'd assume for that big of a difference that it
pinky.
Would be an intentional change.
Right.
I certainly like how it looks. The only thing that I wish is that they'd taken this kind of hue and made it a coloured vinyl. Yeah. Because it's just a black vinyl in there. There's the inset as well. It's just
that's quite nice. I like
the same. But yeah, like nice kind of like landscape picture. Again, not very similar to what the album sounds like. It doesn't tell you what it's going to sound like just from that, but
yeah. It looks like it's taken from quite far. And what I heard as well, they're actually in that photograph somewhere.
That wouldn't shock me actually. Yeah,
they're in there somewhere.
Well, I'm not gonna try and find it now. I'm gonna do a Where's Wally now.
Yeah, find Wally, but they're supposed to be in that photo. I know this sleeve.
But yeah, There we are. Amber.